little concerned about iPad sales, and this was again down. 13% decline over the previous quarter. Year over year, 19% decline. Sales for the iPad are slowing. You see those spikes. That's, of course, when new iPads are announced in Q1.
I don't think that we've seen the upgrade cycle yet for iPad. If you look at iPhones, people are willing to trade an iPhone in, pay extra to get the new iPhone, to get out of their current one. But for the iPad, I think it's more along the lines of a computer upgrade. You know, you're willing to keep a computer for several years before you upgrade. And that, I think, is what's going on here. I'm still not concerned about iPad sales because I still think that we're in a situation where, you know, in the next year or so, we're going to start to see some churn in sales and people upgrading.
What will stimulate that? Is it a newer, better product, or is it the death of the old iPad? What is going to make people upgrade?
Well, certainly it's going to be the death of older devices.
My battery doesn't work anymore.
Right. You know, there's going to be little things like that. The new features in the OS and certainly the hardware itself, where it allows people to do more and more. And we're starting to see that already, where new OS versions and new hardware allow people to do more, and people want to do more. Now, there are a lot of people out there, older people and younger people, who will just use an iPad for internet, for, you know, email and web surfing. And for those ones, the older iPads are just fine. But, you know, we're still seeing iPad sales, I think, because people like me and you and Rene and Andy who want to do a little bit more and will go out and get that. But at some point, you know, even with the oldest iPad or the oldest computer, you're going to do an upgrade. And I think that when that churn starts, then we're going to see things pop a bit.
Do people still use their iPads, right? I mean, that's actually, to me, that would be the metric. Not what sales are like, but you see people using their iPads.
Yeah. It's going to be interesting to see what effect iOS 9 and if Apple does come up with an iPad Pro comes along, because again, 90% of the close to 90% of the people out there are not Mac users; they're Windows users, and they're going to a store with $500 or $600 in their hands. They may not see the reason to walk out with a 9.7-inch. One app at a time, one window at a time, really honking, huge book reader looking sort of device. But it's going to be interesting when Apple has iOS 9, where they have interfaces that have been on part of Windows since Windows 8 that make it really, really efficient to be truly productive with multiple apps on this small screen at the same time. Apple will finally have a really credible answer to the question, I've got $500 or $600, I want to buy a laptop that doesn't have to do everything, but it has to do the basics and do them well. What do you got for me? And Apple has never had an answer to that question, but once they have the ability to simply demonstrate, here's how you run multiple apps at the same time, and here's how you can be on one app and still be watching a video in the corner of the screen at the same time. I think that's going to siphon off a lot of the people who otherwise would be spending that money on a very nice Asus Windows laptop or Windows convertible.
On my vacation, I saw a lot of. So I was surprised to see a lot of Android tablets. I saw quite a few iPads, and by the way, much older crowd. Okay, so. It's a riverboat cruise, so the average age is in the 70s.
Also, a lot of these people, a lot of cable companies are actually giving away laptops with that. So that's where a lot of those things.
There's one thing that Jim said that I think is really interesting there, though, and Tim Cook, I believe, on the earnings call said that we haven't seen the iPad upgrade cycle yet, or at least Apple hasn't seen it.
They just didn't know what it was. It's a new product. They don't know what it's going to be. Same thing with the watch.
But when you look at the iPhone, people upgrade for specific reasons. Like a lot of people upgrade because they want a better camera, because the iPhone literally is the camera they have with them. Or they see something like you can play games. There are a lot of reasons why they've seen people specifically upgrade an iPhone. But when you look at the iPad, it's been sold to a lot of people for whom traditional computers are inaccessible or intimidating or otherwise not appealing.
Exactly.
Yeah, and they don't, like, if there's a laminated screen on the iPad Air 2, it's meaningless to them. So there's no point in upgrading, but they'll come to a point where that iPad 2 is just too sluggish, or the battery dies, or something else happens, and they love the iPad, so they're going to want to get it. And yes, there will be people there are now who use it as a laptop alternative, and it'll be even better for them. But there'll be all these people who will just they'll never open Slide Over, or they'll never open Split View. It'll just be another really simple, awesome computer that is exactly what they need for for their computing, and they'll buy the next one, and maybe it's a 3-year cycle, 4-year cycle. I mean, Apple makes these things pretty well. I've got iPad 2's relatives are still using them wonderfully today. Maybe not next year, maybe not the year after, and they'll have to buy something new. But until we start seeing that, like you said, Leo, it's a new product. We have no idea what the cycle is.
Yeah, and that realize that does go both ways too. Apple sold gangbusters 9.7-inch iPads when all they had in the world were 9.7-inch iPads to sell.
Right.
When there were no when there were no color Kindles, there were no large size phone tablets. I really wish we could see more numbers. I really wish Apple could break down what models sell in which proportions, because I certainly see fewer 9.7-inch iPads in the field as I do iPad minis. And I also know from other market research that a lot of people who might have gone for an iPad mini or even a full-sized iPad are now saying, well, gee, now I got a 5.8-inch, 5.9-inch phone. All I wanted was a slightly larger screen so that I could read cool stuff on the bus or on the subway in the morning. And this big phone seems to address that for me quite adequately. So we really don't know one way or another. It's possible that we're going to see a huge churn of people coming in who bought iPads 3 years ago, and as soon as they see a new iPad with that one magic new feature they're waiting for, everyone rushes in to buy the new one. Or we could see, just as legitimately, proof that 9.7 inches was never an ideal size. It was never the size that consumers wanted. It was just the size that was available, and that's what built the success of the iPad. We just don't know.
I don't think that's it. I think that there were other sizes available, but I think that was the optimum size for the technology that Apple wanted to put in it at the time. And, you know, I mean, Steve famously said that he didn't want to do a smaller iPad, but he did. And I think a lot of that has to do with the technology that's available and what the market shows after you release a product. And you have to be willing to make changes like that.